Hi guys, welcome back to the Confused Millennial podcast. I'm Rachel, your host and the blogger behind theconfusedmillennial.com. This is a podcast all about helping you embrace more of who you are while navigating this whole adulting thing. We cover topics with shamans and psychics and spirituality to your career and relationships and all that good stuff. And today's guest is the fabulous Alexi Panos. She is a self-proclaimed personal development junkie, and she's making it her mission to make all of this personal development and growth stuff totally mainstream. She has authored 2 books, 50 Ways to Yay and Now or Never, which she co-authored with her husband, Preston Smiles, who you might remember from episode 27 of this podcast. Highly recommend that you check that episode out in case you missed it. She also does workshops, life coaching, international speaking engagements. She started a nonprofit in her 20s called Epic in Africa, where she focuses on bringing clean water to thousands of people. And as you guys will hear, she's just a total beast, and she's a new mom. So we are going to cover so much ground in this episode. We talk about everything from how she went from being in the entertainment industry to starting her nonprofit and, becoming a life coach and a speaker and an author. We talk a lot about how we co-create certain agreements in our lives and how expectations can lead to disappointments and how we can handle those situations. We also talk about one of my favorite techniques from my counseling days, Gestalt techniques, and we actually role play something for you guys later on so that you guys can actually see what some of this stuff sounds like in your daily lives and how you can go ahead and just build better relationships. And it's just one of those episodes where I'm super excited about. So with that, we're just going to hop right into the interview with Alexi. All right. Welcome to the show, Alexi.
Thanks. So happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. You are somebody that continuously popped up on my Instagram for so long, where people would be sharing your videos and their Insta stories and things like that. And I'm just super excited that we're getting to sit down and talk, because I feel like there's not a ton of women out there that are so inspiring and so relatable at the same time and grounded and down to earth, but will really kick you in the ass too with their words.
I do love a good ass kicking for sure. I appreciate that. It's all a beautiful reflection of years of being in my own shit and being in the work and really wanting to find my own edge. So yeah.
Well, you've had such an interesting journey too, because you tell the story about you ended up going to a music, a group talent find search and going on tour with Ja Rule. So how do we go from that whole thing into personal?
How did we get here?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, sometimes I ask myself that question, how did I get here? It's so random. So basically, super long story short, I was a kid who never turned down a dare. My sister's friend always wanted to be a singer. I was 15. We were at my mom's house for the summer. My parents are split. We were always able to invite our friends. And my sister's friend is like, oh my God, there's an audition for this girl group. We should call this number. And we're all like, no, let's just go see a movie. And she's like, Lexi, I dare you to do it with me. Shit. So her and I call this number. We both get a call back. We end up singing live in person for this guy, Rodney Jerkins, who master producer. He produced Destiny's Child, Brandy and Monica, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston. I mean, you name it, he did it. And he signed a development deal with me and said, I want to develop you as a solo artist. So 15 to about 17, I was working with his songwriters and his choreographers and all the things, and his vocal talent and all of that to really cultivate a singing career, which I never wanted to be a singer, but I was like, hey, this sounds cool. Awesome. Let's do it. Sure. Why not? And then that turned to my mom meeting Ja Rule and saying, hey, my daughter's working with Rodney Jerkins. He's like, I'd love to meet her. We're looking to sign new artists. I ended up meeting them, getting flown out to LA, doing a test in the studio. And that led me to 2 years on the road, signing under Murder Inc., going on tour around the world with them, basically getting my mind blown because I'm this small town girl from Erie, Pennsylvania. And now I'm on tour with one of the biggest acts at that time, and meeting all these famous people. And so I was living this rock star life, which was totally what I thought I wanted as a teenager. And I quickly realized that it's not all it's cracked up to be. And that led me to kind of my big first awakening at 20 years old, where I was in South Africa on tour, and we had just spent all this money at a nightclub on champagne and booze and partying. And we're getting back on the tour bus, and I see a shanty town to my left, and it's like the tour bus, which is all, you know, it represented this like rock star, glamorous, excessive lifestyle. And I recognized that I had totally sold out, like I totally sold out on myself. And I was the kid who, you know, when I was 9 years old, was raising money for animals and shelters that were affected by the hurricane. Like, that's who I was as a kid. And I totally just like stomped on that person to get this elusive life that I thought was, you know, the thing. And so that really started this whole unraveling, where I pulled out of the music industry right before my album was supposed to come out. I disappeared. I got a bartending job, started a nonprofit organization, started going to Africa on my own with my friends, building water wells, revamping schools, working within the communities. Got back into entertainment in my 20s in New York to pay for my nonprofit. And so I was doing television and modeling stuff just so I could have the freedom to travel to Africa whenever I wanted, and also make great money. And I was always into personal development. Like, this whole time, since I was a kid, I went to my first Tony Robbins event at 16, completed landmark education at 18. So it was always in me, but it was always being used to get somewhere. Like, oh, I'll use all of these skills to become more successful. And I was very successful in my 20s. But again, I climbed another ladder, you know, in the entertainment industry, and getting 6-figure contracts on network television, but just feeling empty inside. So here I was on set coaching, right? And not realizing I was coaching the makeup artist and the hairstylist and, you know, the models I was working on, you know, for shoots with. And it's like, oh, maybe I could do this. Like, maybe I could actually do something with this. So I took a life coaching certification at NYU when nobody knew what the fuck a life coach was. Is that like a soccer coach? I'm confused. I was like, yeah, kind of. It's like a psychologist, but without the long university thing. And I loved it. I thought it was great. I didn't know how to market myself at first. So I was just like doing one-on-ones with people who would reach out to me. And then I started getting hired to do authenticity workshops at like big corporate, masculine, entrepreneurial things. And I loved it. And I was like, I'm actually really good at this. And then that turned into trusting that more and feeling really disconnected more from my entertainment world. And just one day I had to really take the leap and decide that, you know what, this is no longer going to be my safety net, this cushy income and job that is celebrated in the world. And I'm going to go all in on this and see what happens.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And you said so many things that I love too, because I always tell people, like, go back to who you were, what your interests were as a kid, because that's usually who you are, like, at your truest essence. It's before like all of the shoulds and societal standards and everything like that weigh us down and confuse us.
Totally. And that's so huge, because as a kid, I knew I was meant to do something. And I don't want to use great, because, you know, it's a label. I knew I was meant to do something that would affect a lot of lives. And as a kid, I was tapped into that by just being in service, right? But then as I got into that like preteen teenage years, the only examples I saw were people who were famous that were able to affect a big amount of change with a lot of lives. So I went for fame thinking that I had to have the platform to do it. And truthfully, I didn't. I just had to get back to my roots and serve.
Yes. I think that's the cool thing that's happening right now too, is just how much, you know, we really only had to look up to was what we saw in magazines and things like that. And now, thanks to the internet, like, we can find people like you and things like that that are just that are really actually doing things that are based off of substance and helping humanity and moving things forward with just a greater consciousness and love and all of that good stuff. Because I mean, that's so much of what we need. Like, I really have become so cognizant of like the TV shows I watch and stuff like that, because you're downloading all of that and it ends up manifesting in your life. Like, if you keep watching TV shows that have terrible bosses and then complaining about your boss, it's because that's the lens that you're like learning to view things through.
Yep. And it becomes your new normal. It becomes a part of your lexicon. And then it's like, okay, this is, I guess, how people are. They just complain and they're kind of tapped out of their life. So maybe I need to be that. And we do it unconsciously, but it's so insidious. It like creeps up everywhere.
Definitely. So because, you know, you started down the entertainment path at about 15, and then you did this life coaching certification in your 20s, about like,
26.
26. So yeah, so I wanted to point that out too, because it's like, you know, so often we think about making these big leaps or these big transitions in our lives, and like that was over 10-year building block of just like
figuring it out.
Yes. Like, I think sometimes we all get really impatient and are like, when is this going to happen? I know that I'm supposed to be doing this, but it doesn't just happen overnight. It's, I'm sure for you, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That safety net's really nice. Maybe I don't want to do this. Like, that all is behind the scenes too.
Totally. And I want to point out that I got the life coaching certification and really didn't fully step in full time for 4 years.
Yes, I love that too. So let's talk a little bit about life coaching, because, you know, my background, actually, I have my master's degree in counseling. So I actually was a therapist before becoming a blogger and podcaster.
Right.
And so life coaching was one of those really interesting things to me, because there were some hiccups and bumps in the road on my way to licensure with becoming a therapist that led me down this path of accidentally becoming a blogger. But I did do life coaching as my safety net for a while there.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting field where I get so many people that like reach out to me and they're like, I want to get a life coach. How would you tell people to like figure out if somebody's actually a good one? Because I actually like that you did a certification and didn't start practicing it for 4 years. Because to be a life coach, I truly believe it has to be a calling. Like, your energy, your passion has to show up in a very specific way for all of your clients, so that it's not about your shit, which happens way too often in that field.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it's actually like one of the pain points that I experienced in myself in this industry. Like, it's a gift and a curse, right? Like, right now it's really popular for people to take their lives on and to get into the work and to like become woke and all of those things. And in the same breath, because being an entrepreneur is really popular as well, people are like, how do I connect the two? Oh, I'll become a coach. And I love that in one breath. And in another breath, it's also very scary, because there's a lot of people who don't really have the experience, number one, are giving advice and not actually coaching. And to be clear, coaching is not advice. For those of you who are like, oh, well, I'm always like, you know, I'm always the person who gives advice to my friends. I should be a life coach. That's not what coaching is. And it's really scary to think that people are handing their lives over to somebody who may not have the wherewithal to really hold that container and to call you forward in a safe way. And so that's my little like public service announcement.
Which I really appreciate.
It's like not enough of us are speaking about this, and I think it's really important we do. So for those who are like, I really want to work with a life coach, I'm feeling like I need someone to hold me accountable. The biggest thing I always say, if you've like heard of someone or somebody's in your feed, reach out to them and say, hey, I'm interested in perhaps working with you one-on-one. Do you have any client testimonials or people I could reach out to? I love learning from other people and like getting that tap on the shoulder, like, hey, this person's awesome. Like, to me, reviews and testimonials speak volumes, and a really good coach will actually say, yeah, I can actually like connect you with one of my past clients if you want to hear straight from the horse's mouth of how the experience went. And that for me was a really great way of how I built my coaching practice, was through word of mouth. But when people reached out to me kind of cold and didn't really know anybody that was connected, I had clients that were like, I would love to share my experience of working with you with somebody else who's considering it. So it's not that our lives have to be perfect, because we're all human and we all have our edges that we're leaning into. But we get to at least be in the embodiment of the work that we practice and that we preach, right? We must be in the practice of it. And there's far too many people that I know personally who are out there going, I'm a coach, I'm a coach, I'm a coach. And then when it's not sparkly and perfect on Instagram, I can see their life and I can see that they're not actually living what they're preaching. And that's a huge disconnect in integrity. And I think if they can't even apply the principles and tools that they're sharing with their clients and expecting their clients to apply, in my opinion, they shouldn't be a coach.
Yes, I'm totally with you on that. You know, I always find it more comforting when I see people doing a lot of video and not like polished YouTube-y video ones, but like just on their Insta stories and things like that, or like you hear them talking on a podcast, stuff like that, because you can usually pick up, like if you're listening to somebody talk and you kind of like get a pit in your stomach, you kind of like start checking out things like that. It's usually because our intuition is tapping into whatever's actually going on with that person. And if they're not living their truth, we can feel that through Insta stories. We can feel that through podcasts. I feel like YouTube, because it's more polished, is easier to hide.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that's one of the gifts of social media right now is like lives and Insta stories and all of those. You're getting a taste of somebody's real context. Like it's not produced. It's not edited. Like, listen, anybody can read a really good book, highlight a portion of it, memorize it, and then shoot a video, cut a bunch of edits where they messed up and make it sound like they know what they're talking about.
Yep.
But 95% of the people out there who are just new at coaching or claiming to be a coach who maybe shouldn't be or aren't ready yet, they won't go live.
No,
they won't go live.
It's so true. It's so true because I mean, when I struggled so much with like imposter syndrome and things like that, you could not catch me anywhere near that with a 10-foot pole. I wouldn't go on Insta stories. I definitely would not have had a podcast. Forget about that. Like,
yeah. You're like, how am I going to be able to have a conversation for an hour about this?
Yeah. You know, and to that point too, like be cautious of like the webinars that you sign up for, because a lot of them say they're live and a lot of them are pre-recorded. Like I know I would sign up for somebody's webinar and 6 months later, it would be the exact same webinar because I had screenshotted it and I'm like, oh, those are the exact same questions with the exact same names in the quote unquote live chat bot. And so just be careful with those things. Anything that like seems to have a really strong sales funnel, usually just like look for the holes is what I always say, like question it.
Yeah. And look for authentic marketing. You know, like there's nothing wrong with business and marketing, but in my opinion, it gets to be authentic. It gets to be like, hey, sign up to watch this replay of this awesome masterclass I did. Like,
exactly.
What's the problem with saying it's live or a replay? Like, who cares? If it's awesome content, like just be honest about what it is. So I love people that use honesty in their marketing and show up authentically. And you can smell it from a mile away when somebody's trying to trick you as well.
Totally. Oh, I love that. So with that too, you know, you actually are the only person I've come across, I think in the last 4 years since I've been out of the counseling world, that actually references Gestalt techniques, which I'm so excited about because in my counseling days, Gestalt was what I was trained in. It was one of my favorite techniques. And you've talked in the past about wholeness. Like you can't have the feminine without the masculine. You can't be a light worker without acknowledging that you're a dark worker. And you know, the concept of Gestalt all has to do with the unified whole. So I'm super curious. Like in your own words, like what does Gestalt therapy, coaching, practicing techniques mean to you? Like, how did you stumble into it? How do you use it today for your own, just even day-to-day life or with clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know how I initially stumbled into it. I'm like crazy lifelong student. I'm always reading. And then, you know how like certain books will reference certain practices or therapies and I'll like highlight and it's like, get this book. So I have books on books on books. And that's probably how I came to it. Honestly, the unified whole for me has been one of my personal biggest lessons and my personal biggest edges, because the world in the past for me was very black and white. It was very much like all in or all out, or, you know, it was very much like, oh, well, I'm this person and this is who I am and I'm showing up in this way, versus, oh, I can be integrated and I can find the cross point of the woven between the feminine and the masculine. I can find the cross point of my light and my darkness versus trying to just get to all light and trying to just be all perfect. And I think that for me has been, again, one of my biggest edges is really coming into full acceptance of myself and honoring all parts of me. And that is a reflection of my external life as well. Like, for so long, I was struggling to get all of this perfect and trying to get all of this light and trying to get all of this to look exactly how I thought it should look versus just accepting what it was, both the light and the dark, the shadows, the brilliance, all of it, and embracing all of that and bringing that into my space and being a student of both, because both are such phenomenal teachers and both offer so much wisdom for the whole human. And I think so many of us are living these segmented lives where we're one way at work, we're one way with our family, we're one way, you know, when we're playing and when we're drinking or going out or whatever it might be, but bringing all facets of ourselves together and stepping authentically into that whole being with all parts of ourselves in all aspects of our lives. And Preston and I have brought in a lot of the wisdom of Gestalt into the Bridge, which is one of our experiential workshops. Because again, we find that this is one of the diseases of our modern society is the segmentation of who we are.
Totally. And I think that's like one of the areas where depression and anxiety start to come up for so many people, because we aren't acknowledging, like, I have feelings and I'm allowed to have feelings if I'm in front of this person. It's not like it just turns off. It's not like it just goes away when I've stepped away from this. And, you know, and you talk a lot about this, which I always love. And this is where I like had personally used a lot of Gestalt techniques. You know, it's one of them is called the empty chair technique, where you essentially sit in a room with an empty chair and you kind of, I mean, you can put something there if you want to, and you work through some of the wounds and things like that have come up for you as it relates to this person, because those wounds get poked and prodded through our daily lives. And until we can really go through and heal them, you know, we tend to play out those same patterns over and over, just with different faces in our lives.
Totally.
And, you know, you guys talk a lot about, you know, you're not responsible for your wound. You're probably not responsible for your wounds, but it's your responsibility to heal them.
Yeah.
And I think too often we forget that and we lose sight of that today. And
totally.
So,
and if you look at the languaging, even responsibility, the ability to respond, doesn't mean that we caused it. It doesn't mean we're to blame for it. But if we're still festering and sitting in the hurt and the resentment and the fear from it, it's our ability to respond that gives us the power of choice. And I think, you know, like you said so beautifully, Gestalt is one of those spaces where you can give your wound permission to be there and to feel and to cathartic without necessarily having to have that conversation with one particular person, because like you said, the wound has many faces and it'll keep showing up again and again in different partners, in different family members, in different friends, until we face off with the thing underneath it. Right. So, yeah.
I love that. You know, and, you know, for those that have been listening for a little while, episode 29, we talked a lot about like navigating difficult family dynamics. And, you know, both Al, who was the guest on the episode, and we talked about how we both confronted our moms at various points in our life. And like through using Gestalt, like that's not necessary, because at the end of the day, like we see how hard it is just to change ourselves as people. So how can we ask somebody else to change, you know? Like,
totally.
It's up to you to, like, I love what you just said about responsibility, to choose how you're going to respond going forward. And that means like really thinking about what's going to work for you, how to create a safe space. It's not always going to look perfect. You're not always going to respond in the way that your highest good, in the way that you would ideally like to. But it's how you start to actually move the dial forward on change at the end of the day.
Totally.
I want to put a quick pause on this interview with Alexi to tell you about an awesome giveaway I have happening right now, especially for all you work from home bosses out there. I've partnered with Logitech to give one lucky winner $500 worth of goodies to really up-level your home office. A couple of the items in the bundle that I've absolutely been loving and have totally changed my workspace are the 4K webcam and Bluetooth wireless keyboard that syncs up with any device. I don't know if you're like me, but I swear Instagram has been giving me carpal tunnel syndrome, and I am so happy I can now chat with you guys via DM using the Logitech keyboard instead of my thumb. Seriously, it's been a lifesaver or game changer or both. I can't even tell you. For all the details on the other Logitech items in the giveaway and how to enter, visit bit.ly/LogitechTCM. That's all lowercase, bit.ly/LogitechTCM for the giveaway details. In short, though, how you're going to enter is super simple. You'll make sure you're following me on Instagram at The Confused Millennial. Make sure you're following Logitech on Instagram at Logitech. And then there will be an Instagram photo that'll be going live the same day as this episode. And you'll tag a friend in the comments of that photo. And then there's going to be some bonus ways to enter outlined in that photo as well. If you need a recap of any of that, again, all those details will be at bit.ly/LogitechTCM or in the show notes for this episode. So with all that kind of said, with having Kingston, your 6-month-old son who's adorable, where do you feel like your wounds come up, and how do you kind of navigate all that and work through those just obstacles, pain points, growth moments? I don't know what you want to call them, I'm sure.
There's honestly so many areas that have been like growth points for me since having a child. I mean, growth points around my relationship with Preston, where, we thought we were nailing relationships. And then we brought in a third person and we're like, oh, there's still some things we get to look at. Mm-hmm. And that was huge for us, because we really got into an amazing flow with our partnership. And the minute we were sleep deprived and, both looking down and focusing our energy on a third party in our relationship, it brought up a lot of different dynamics where we never had to look at those areas before. We never had our wounds come up because we never had that exact scenario to call those wounds forward. So it's really amazing because it helped Preston and I deeply level up in our relationship and deepen our communication and our intention to really be phenomenal parents, but also be phenomenal partners as an example for our son and future children. And so that was a huge, huge, huge one. And the second one, and again, I'm saying there's so many, there's not just two, but the second one I'll share is actually came as a surprise to me because it was something that I deemed as really effective in my life. And it was this go, 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 hustle, 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 create, create, create. I was always very driven since I was little. Always the person who would accomplish 10,000 things when most people would accomplish one thing. And it was something that I wore proudly. I come from a family of entrepreneurs and we all kind of had that thing about us. And when Kingston came in, I felt myself at this crossroads where I felt that old identity in me really challenged because she didn't know how to exist in this new paradigm where there's this amazing little being who is creating a new identity and a new space within me that feels really settled and grounded. And what I've unpacked that to be is that, I picture if I'm a sailboat and the wind that has been pushing my sailboat forward and blasting my sailboat into the front of the race every time, there's this competitiveness and proving underneath my productivity. And it wasn't that I was proving to anybody my mom, I'll show you, mom, or, it wasn't about anybody else, but it was proving something to myself. When Kingston came, I went through this amazing thing actually throughout my pregnancy where I really, really came into deep communion with how powerful of a being I am, but we all are. I was we're able to create life. And I let that land. It wasn't just oh yeah, we're able to create life. How cool. I was holy shit, I'm building a penis inside of my body right now. I legitimately was like mind blown. And it landed for me, and I unpacked that through the months of my pregnancy. I unpacked it. I, did a home birth at a home, and I just unpacked it during the home birth of like, oh my gosh, our bodies are just built for such like magnificence and the capacity that we can hold, especially as women. Like, oh my God, this is incredible. And it really just created such a deep knowing within me, and not just like a belief, but a deep knowing that everything is good. And it was like this trust of just like trust, like all you have to do for life to emerge, like we're talking human beings with beating hearts and brains that have their own lives, that do stuff. For life to emerge, all you have to do is plant the seed and then create the perfect environment for that seed to germinate, and then get out of the way. Yeah. And like that was huge for me, because normally the old me would say, well, all you have to do is plant the seed, then you have to till the soil, then you got to pull all the weeds, then you got to watch it, then you got to make sure there's sunlight every day. If there's not sunlight, you create artificial sunlight. Like there was such a struggle and like a pushing through versus like receiving. And that receiving that trust has been like the biggest weight off of my shoulders that I didn't even know I had. It was like, and I'm still in it. I'm still like, it's crazy. I'm looking at how my life was set up in one particular context, from this like underlying competitiveness and proving myself. Look, I'm finally worthy. Look, I finally did it. Right. Versus, I've always been worthy. I've always been able to do it. And now I just have to plant the seed and get out of the way.
I love that, because, so often, like, especially being pregnant, well, even before we got pregnant, we would always hear from people, oh, when you have kids, you can't do that. Oh, when you have kids, you can't do that. And it's like, okay, yes, we get it. Like, your life's change when you have kids. Like, we're not naive. Yeah. I grew up like nannying and babysitting. Like, I know what it's like. I mean, I got to go home at night, but I still spent 12 hours a day with babies. So like, I know how exhausting it can be, but I love following you because, in the old days, I'm sure like, the achievement, I'm going to till the soil, I'm going to create the artificial sunlight, Alexi would have probably had a lot more like need for control, but you guys just went on like a transatlantic over a month tour, like to all these different places with a under 6-month-old. And like, that's one of those things that people say you can't do, but like here you are doing it. And it's because you just get out of the way, like keep the baby alive, get out of the way. Like totally. And here's the big thing too, because that we had so many people be like, oh, if you're pregnant, like you're going to stop traveling as much. And we're like, no, like maybe we'll stop traveling when it's right for us as a family, but like we're not changing our plans for next year. And one of the big things that Preston and I came to a conclusion on as a couple is that our child's spirit, in our belief, chose us. He chose us for the lessons that he came here to get. And he chose me as his mother, because I've got my things that are going to activate his things, and Preston's got his things that are going to activate Kingston's things. And he chose us as a lifestyle because he wanted a certain experience in this life. So if we just all of a sudden change our entire life for him, then it's doing a disservice for what he came here for. So we truly believe that. And our life has shifted so beautifully since he's come in, and we're also being very true to ourselves as well. Oh, I love that. It's exactly what Eric and I believe too. And so awesome. I mean, because both of us had visions of our kids before, like we both kind of knew we were going to have 2 kids, and they both came to us in visions before I was ever pregnant. And so, so it's just like, okay, like the babies had been with us. They had been in our energy field. We walked into a Reiki circle, and the Reiki master's like, you have 2 kids. They're not coming yet, but they're already with you. And like, I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. And so, that's where I find so much comfort, because when I first met, for those of you that have been listening for a while, I had Shaman Dirk on episode 14 and 15. When we met in January, he's like, I wasn't even thinking about kids really. And he's just randomly, it's like, kids? And I'm like, what about them? He's like, do you want them? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, there's a block in your ovary. There's a block in your uterus that's not allowing you to get pregnant because you're so afraid of impacting another human's life. And like, I had been through so much trauma. I had been through so much like abuse that I didn't understand it was abuse, because I mean, there was like the physical stuff, but there's just also, there's so much of that emotional and verbal stuff that we're still just learning about, where for so many years I thought I was crazy. I couldn't trust my own intuition. And so I had this huge fear about having kids, because I was like, what if I do that to somebody else? And I have found so much comfort in also believing everything that you just said as I've like learned about all the spirituality stuff, because it just takes a lot of pressure off when you're like, okay, they know what they signed up for.
Totally. And here's the thing, like, again, it's this whole unified whole, like every human, I don't care how perfect your parents are or how perfect your life is set up, every human is going to find their shadow. Every human is going to experience darkness, because every day we don't have just perfect days. We don't have just perfect weather all the time. Like, we can look at nature as an example. Like, for anyone that's having a hard time hearing that, look at nature. It's not always sunny all year round without any type of wildfires or earthquakes or tornadoes or hurricanes. Like, the world has both and all. So how can we possibly think that we're different than nature? We are nature. We're a part of it. So we have the storms, we have the darkness, we have the light, we have the rainbows, we have all of it. But we have to stop thinking that it's my job to make sure my kid just experiences light. In my opinion, it's our job as parents to make sure our kids are equipped with the capacity and the ability to respond to life, however life shows up. That's our job. I
love that. I'm super curious. This is totally a selfish question, you guys, so bear with me. Because you went on that whole music search at like 15. Were you in traditional schooling? Like, did you take the traditional school path?
So I did. I was public school education. At 15, I left and moved with my mom to work with Rodney Jerkin. She lived in New Jersey. I moved from Pennsylvania. I skipped a year of high school because I went to a really good public school. My grades were great. And because I skipped my junior year and essentially finished all of their curriculum at that school that I moved to, I only really had like 10 credits to complete by the end of the year. So I took a home ec class and a chemistry class, and that was it. So I was literally going to school like 2 days out of 5 days of the week. And then the rest of the time I was in the studio and doing work.
That's awesome. And then did you go to college?
I did not.
Okay. So I'm so happy that you said that, because when, like I said, you know, my future daughter came to me in that vision, she like showed me like all these images of what her life was going to be like, and I'm like, okay. But like, she wasn't in traditional schooling. And so we keep getting all the stuff where people are like, oh, but your kid, like, what about schools? What about schools? Because we're thinking about this big move. And I'm like, first of all, the baby's still growing inside of me. And then so like it starts school the next year. Like,
we got some time.
we got time. And I'm like, on the other hand, I'm like, I just keep getting this feeling like she's not going to be in traditional schools. Like, I just don't. She showed me that she was creating her own curriculum. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go with whatever that ends up being, and we'll figure it out. Like, I'm not here to like impede on that.
That's it. And honestly, like, we're in that same conversation around Kingston. Like, we're making sure he's highly socialized. He's been around more people than most adults have been around in their entire life. Highly socialized. And we're going to see how he learns. Like, every human learns differently. For instance, I have a very structured brain. So like, traditional education works really well for me because my brain fits into these like very structured things. Preston does not have a very structured brain. He's more creative and learns through speaking and learns through experience, right? So if Kingston has more of that brain where he needs to be more in the doing to learn, and he can't just be in the theory of it, we're going to make sure we nurture his learning style and not try and fit him into some box that was created in the Industrial Revolution when we needed to create really good robotic workers. You know, like, I'm clear on that. And I'm also clear on the fact that I have so many amazing friends who are incredible entrepreneurs and thought leaders in the world who are creating new education systems as we speak, so that we won't even have to have these conversations because there's going to be so many new options available in the next couple of years, which
it's like music to my ears. Yeah. Because no, I mean, I would like you. I did really well in like school, but I had hacked the system. Like I never did homework outside of school. I went into college as like a junior already. Like it was a joke for me. No.
Same.
And my husband, like, he thought so much of his life. He's an entrepreneur. He's on his second company now. He thought that he wasn't smart for so many years because the traditional school system did not work for him. And like, I'm like, but you were literally one of the smartest, most out of the box creative thinkers I know. Like, what? Like, how? And so I'm just like, I saw what toll that can take on somebody's self-esteem. I'm like, why put somebody through that? Like, why do that? Like, but yeah, so thanks for letting me go through my selfish questions. I'm always super curious what people did, because it's so cool to think about, like, you don't have to do these formal things and you still like find your path, and like how happy and free life can just be when we follow what we're being called to do. It can be that simple.
That's it. And that's the big highlight that I want to like asterisk, underline, bold, is that you don't have to go the traditional route that you think you do in order to have a great life. Mm-hmm. And I think so many people think that it looks a particular way. I've got to get a degree. I've got to then get a really good job that pays a certain amount. And then I got to live in this city, and I've got to have this type of partner, and then have kids by this age. And truthfully, a lot of people are getting there and then realizing like they've actually not done anything mm-hmm. that's deeply aligned for their soul. And yes, that may sound woo woo and whatever, but like legit, avoid the midlife crisis by listening now.
Mm-hmm.
like you can avoid the midlife crisis, and it can be the midlife catalyst. It could be the quarter life catalyst, where you just check in and go, oh, is this actually what I want? Or am I just like trudging along? Like I have someone in my family who went to college, did all the things, got a great job out of college that everyone would have died to have. And mm-hmm. he hates it. Mm-hmm. He absolutely hates it. But he's like, well, the 401k is really good. And I'm like, yeah, but your soul is dying. Mm-hmm. Like, can we talk about the fact that you legitimately hate waking up in the morning and cannot wait for Saturday and Sunday? Like, guys, second public service announcement. You do not have to just love Saturday and Sunday. Yes. I promise you, every day can be awesome if you love what you do.
It's so true. I mean, when I had my 9 to 5, I had a letter from my 10-year-old self saying I wanted to be a psychologist. And when I was working in this company that I thought was my dream, I was crying every single day. And I was the poster child for self-care. I would go to yoga on my lunch break. I'd go to the beach. I'd go for a run on the beach in the morning, a walk on the beach after work to decompress. And I was coming home, gutting on my couch, and I couldn't even cook myself food. I was so depressed. Like, wow. It was a necessary stepping stone because it got me to heal, and I learned so much about myself. And it was definitely part of my personal journey that I needed to go through. But like, that was not my forever career, despite what I had thought. Like, I think my 10-year-old self wrote that letter because she knew like that was the only way I was going to get some of the therapy and things that I needed, was going down that path. And it's just so wild. Like, if it's not working, don't white knuckle it. There's no reason to.
So there isn't. And you know, the thing is what's the point, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the point? Like, why are you working? And I asked this to this family member, like, what's the point? He's like, well, I'm doing this now so that eventually I can have money, so that eventually I can fill in the blank, right? Yeah. And that's a lot of people's conversation. Well, I'll just stick through it for the next, grit my teeth and bear it for the next however long, so that I can eventually. And life is not an eventually game. Life is now. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think a lot of people are living for the someday that's off in the distance, not recognizing that they don't get someday promised to them. They have now promised to them, and that's it. So we all think I'm going to live till 80 or 90 years old. But I know way too many people who had that same conversation who aren't here anymore because something crazy happened, and like legit crazy stuff. I know people who have climbed the same mountains I've climbed and then gotten killed because rocks have come down. Like crazy stuff. I know people who have walked outside and gotten hit by a bus. Crazy stuff. Like things that you say like will never happen to me, but they didn't think it would happen to them. So what is the point? Why are you getting up every day and spending 80% of your waking life on something you don't love?
Drop the mic. Exactly. That's it. Like,
doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Like, go back, re-listen to that, especially if you're not happy with your current life situation, because you have the choice to change it all at the end of the day. You know, so you also have talked in the past about creating or co-creating agreements. And I know you do this in your relationship. Well, first of all, what does that mean before we go into my actual question?
Yeah. So co-creating agreements is essentially, we all have agreements, right? We all have agreements and they're unconscious. And these unconscious agreements are running our shoulds. So if you're in a relationship with somebody, and it could be your parents, it could be a coworker, it could be a partner, son, daughter, whoever. If you're in a relationship with somebody and they're not living up to your liking, it's because you have an unconscious agreement about how things should be done. And to you, it's just like, of course, that's just how you should be. And that's based on your programming, your patterning, the conditions that you grew up in, the historical and societal beliefs you grew up in, the cultural identities, all of those things, right? And they're running us and we're not really aware. However, when we come into partnership with whoever, we have the opportunity when those shoulds come up and when those triggers happen to go, hold on. There's an unconscious agreement here. There's a should, which is why I'm pissed off and triggered, because you're not living up to my should. So what is my should? Pull your should up to the top, make it conscious so we can look at it. Ask yourself, where did that come from? Did I actually choose this thing, or is this something that's been passed down to me? And then your partner can do the same thing. Then once you look at your shoulds, you can find something that works for both of you and create a new conscious agreement that you try on for like a trial period. And, you know, Preston and I do a couple of weeks and we like feel into it. Like, does this feel good? Does this? And it's like, no, I'm still kind of triggered by this thing. Okay, I'm still kind of triggered by this. Let's shift this and adjust this a little and try this new agreement on. Then once we find one that sticks, that becomes a standard in our relationship that we uphold with each other based on our new co-created story and co-created agreement of how things should be when it comes to our relationship.
Which I love that. And I like that you pointed out that you can do this like with both your romantic relationships, but with other relationships in your life. What would you say though, if you have somebody that like you have these unconscious things towards, you're trying to bring it to the front but they're not into the co-creating it with you. Like you have to kind of create new agreements with yourself at that point. Like how do you test out different things without the other person being like, what is going on? This is fake. This isn't real, whatever else. Or like, why are you being however you're acting now?
Why are you being strange?
Yes. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And it's such a valid question because a lot of times we'll have one person in partnership in the work and the other person is not. But there's a way you can get all ninja about it, right? And it's actually a way that makes someone go, wow, like you actually are like really listening to me finally, you know? So let's say you're not into it and let's say we're friends and let's say you like to reach out a lot and I never text back, which is true. I'm not a texter, right? And you're feeling slighted by that in our friendship. And I'm someone who knows about these conscious and unconscious agreements and I want to bring it to you. I could just say, hey, you know, I noticed that every time I don't text you back, I feel like a little resistance or resentment from you. Would you say that's true?
Yes.
You're like, oh, I'm playing. Yeah. Okay. Where do you think that comes from? Like, do you think, is that something that feels like is required for you? Or is that something that all your other friends do? Like, can you tell me a little bit more about where that comes from? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I'm going to go full on therapy here. We're going to role play this out for you guys.
We're role play.
I mean, well, sometimes I guess, yeah, I can feel that type of way where like maybe you just don't care about our friendship as much and I'm making an easy person for you. I guess that might come from the fact that like whenever I would try to get my mom's attention, she wouldn't pay attention to me.
Okay. So let's just talk about like caring, because you know I care so much for you. You're one of my best friends and like I love you so much. I want to make sure that you know that. How do you need to hear that from me? Is it just text or are there other ways that you like to feel loved and appreciated?
Oh, wow. Nobody's ever asked me that before. No, I mean, I know that you care about me. I just once in a while, like even if you could just send me a random text that it's not prompted by me would be great.
Ooh, okay. I can totally do that. Cause just so you know, part of my love language and the way I operate is not with the phone. Like, I actually feel like the phone disconnects me from people because I feel like it's very surface and like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it's real and like really dropped in. I would prefer if we can meet up for coffee once a week and like have a scheduled time where we just drop in and have girls time and chat and like vent and whatever we need to do and laugh and just, the things we love to do. Like, I would love to have an hour a week where it's in person instead of over the phone. And I can totally honor, like, I think about you all the time. Like, the other day I was passing this store and I saw this shirt that you would totally have laughed at because it's one of those shirts that we talk about and laugh at all the time. And I could have totally just taken a picture and sent it to you and been like, ha ha ha, ha, thinking about you. But that's not like easy for me to just think about because I don't always have my phone on me. But when I do, I promise that I will do that.
Oh my God, that sounds so awesome. Thank you.
So you see how like we had the conversation without it being like weird, but I let you know kind of my come from, and I was curious and wanted to evoke your come from so that we could come to a place where it's like, oh, I can hear that all you want to know is that you're not always reaching out, that I am thinking about you too, that I care about you too. But didn't it help to hear the perspective that I actually feel more disconnected through the phone and would rather see you in person?
Yeah, of course. And I think, you also did a couple things, like for people that are listening to this, there's two things that will probably come out. Or one thing I want to point out that Alexi did that's essential, which is she asked, is that true? Like, asking clarifying questions in these conversations is your best tool, friend, everything. Like, is that true? Am I getting that right? That's how you can avoid miscommunications from happening. And the other thing where I was like, I'm going to make this easy for you. What's it called? Two things will happen. One, people may get defensive when they say like, what's coming up for you? And I was like, oh, my mom stuff. Not everyone's going to like give you an actual answer. A lot of times people may try to deny that there's a problem, and that's okay. Well, how would you handle that if they're denying there's a problem?
Yeah, well, if you notice with that, I actually didn't address the mom thing at all. Yeah. I just asked, I said, how do you like to be loved and acknowledged and appreciated? Because every human being can answer that, even if they don't necessarily fully know how to eloquently answer that. They can say, oh, well, I guess I like when you come home and instead of getting straight on your phone, you look me in the eyes and ask me how my day was. Like, that's like, we have instances and examples. And I think when we ask those questions that have the person turn inwards in a way that's not like, oh, you're fucked up, let's talk about how fucked up you are, but more so like, how do you like to be loved? How do you like to be communicated to? I'm trying to think of other issues that come up in partnership a lot is, how do you like to act around the opposite sex? Because that's a big thing, right? Like, oh, you did this with her and like, I would have never done that. And it's like, okay, so can you tell me about how you are with the opposite sex so I can understand more about the story that you have around that? It's just really, it's deep listening. It's deep listening and actually getting curious about the person you're in conversation with versus projecting your should onto them or defending your should as if your should is the right way. Yeah.
And you just touched on the second part or the next part of what I was going to say, which is sometimes when you ask people, like, how do you feel loved? How do you want to move forward? What is it that you need? Things like that. A lot of times people don't pause to think about what that actually looks like for them. Sometimes you may be the first person to ever ask them that question. And so if they don't know, be patient and like resist the urge to give them a bunch of options because that's projecting your stuff onto them. Like Alexi just said, like, take that moment, give them the space, tell them they can think about it and you'll come back to it like another time. Because too often we end up saying like, okay, well, this is how I would handle it or this is how I want to do it. And we go back into our stuff rather than that deep listening like you just touched on.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really like, in my opinion, if you want a great relationship, it's just opening up those levels of communication within yourself first. And being the example, a lot of people complain about their partners. Oh, my husband doesn't communicate with me or my boyfriend, he's checked out. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe you're not the space for it, like maybe you're not actually like an open invitation to have a great conversation without judging him or being defensive or, so we really get to look at ourselves and again, put the mirror on ourselves and take responsibility for what's showing up in our lives.
Yes, totally. I love that too. And also just acknowledging like you're never going to be all the things to somebody, like, and nor should you want to. That's exhausting. Like,
yeah. And that's like a recipe for a super codependent relationship. I was just gonna say that's codependence. Never ends well.
No, I love that. Yeah. So definitely I love that, always going inward and things like that. And then there's also points where, you go inward, you do all of the work. And sometimes it really like you have to, I just always want to caution, like, don't beat yourself up at a certain point because you just might be, a different mask for the old demon that somebody's still trying to slay. And like, it's just a losing battle for you. And just always question though whether or not it is you and see what you can improve, because it's always a learning lesson too, because you're back in that relationship for a reason as well.
100%.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so I could talk to you all day.
We could jam like this for a while, for sure.
Oh my gosh, I love it. But tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm hanging out a lot on Instagram these days. I really love Instagram, at Alexi Panos. And then Facebook, same, at Alexi Panos, and YouTube as well, at Alexi Panos. Website, alexipanos.com. I keep it pretty simple for you guys.
I love it. What's the hell? And definitely make sure to go ahead and give her a follow, because she's working on some really exciting things, you guys, that we didn't talk about and is still under wraps, but she keeps teasing us on her Instagram.
I do. It's one of those things that, in my opinion, will truly revolutionize the way we do the work of personal development and transformation. And it's really exciting because it's fusing technology with where we are at in our own humanity and actually like saying, ooh, how can we use this instead of a crutch, but as a possibility? So I'm super excited.
Me too. Oh, thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm super excited.
Yes, me too. It was awesome. Great chatting with you, and like best of luck with the baby and all the things.
Thank you. All right. Hopefully you guys can now see why I'm so obsessed with Alexi. She just all around has amazing energy and amazing outlook on life. And I really would encourage you guys to go back and maybe listen to episode 2 or 3 more times, because there's so many actionable takeaways for just improving your quality of life, improving your relationships, all of that good stuff. And like I said, I've partnered with Logitech to do an awesome giveaway for you guys. One lucky winner is going to be snagging $500 worth of goodies to really up-level your home office. For all the details, visit the Instagram photo that's linked in the show notes of this episode. You can also visit bit.ly/LogitechTCM, all lowercase. Again, that's bit.ly/LogitechTCM, all lowercase, for the giveaway details. But it's really simple. You're basically just going to follow them on Instagram, follow me on Instagram, and tag a friend. There's some bonus options for how to enter too, though, if you follow either of those links, which will both be in the show notes. And with that said, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you take a screenshot of it, and if you post it on your Insta stories, tag me at The Confused Millennial, tag Alexi at Alexi Panos, so that we can see it, we can say hi, maybe share it on our own Insta stories. And as always, if you enjoyed this, make sure that you're subscribed and hit 5 stars, because it always really helps out. And my last announcement, I swear I'm almost done. I am actually going to be moving the podcast down to every other week starting now, basically. I pulled you guys on Instagram. I really appreciate all your support with that. Basically, I love doing the podcast. I don't want to shut it down, but I also want to make sure that I'm getting ahead on content, so that way when the baby does come in the new year, everything can just keep running smoothly. And I really, really like to have high quality guests, and that means it takes a little bit longer to find them, takes a little bit longer to connect with them. And I'm not just putting out content for the sake of getting something up every week. So with that said, in order to give myself some buffer room where I wouldn't have to shut this down, we are going to be moving to every other week starting next starting now. So in 2 weeks, you guys will hear from me again. Another reason to really hit that subscribe button if you aren't subscribed yet, because I know it can be harder to remember to tune in to something when it's every other week. So with all of that, I will leave you guys. Have a great couple weeks. Talk to you soon.